Hi everyone, welcome to Sri Jendra Rank Zone classes, and I'm your educator Amit Ajmani. And in this class, we'll be starting up a fresh chapter, that is heredity and evolution. Now, before starting up the chapter, let us try to relate what exactly characters or traits are. Actually, a recognizable feature of a human being or any other organism, like our height, our complexion, the shape of hair, color of eyes, shape of nose and chin, they all are examples of characters or traits. Our parents, father and mother, contribute equal amount of genetic material, that is the DNA, to the child, and each trait is influenced by maternal as well as paternal DNA. In the previous chapter, How Do Organisms Reproduce? We have studied about how sexual reproduction takes place, how the male gametes and the female gametes, they both fuse, fertilize together to form a zygote. That means the characteristics or the traits of both the parents, they come into the zygote or the offspring. Now, these male and female gametes, they contain the genetic material that is called the genes in the form of DNA and proteins, right? So, all these traits which are transferred to the next generation, that is called heredity. Let's see what is heredity. It is the transmission of traits or characters from parents to the offspring, to the next generation, that is called heredity. Now we know that both the parents, male and female, are involved in sexual reproduction. Few features or traits will be from mother's side and few features or traits will be from father's side. Therefore, there will be difference between the features of the parents as well as the child. A child cannot be 100% copy of mother or cannot be 100% copy of father. There will be some differences, and those differences in the characters or traits among the individuals of a species, they are called variation. Two types of reproduction we have studied: sexual and asexual. In asexual, we have seen that only one parent was involved, but even then there is some amount of variations produced, even though they are very small. Now, why variations are produced in case of the asexual reproducing organisms? Because exact DNA copying is not possible. And when we are talking about the sexual reproduction, then in that case, the number of variations which are produced become very large. Now, these variations are very important. What is the main advantage of variation? These variations in a particular species are very much advantageous because these variations increase the chances of their survival in a changing environment. This is the great advantage, main advantage of variation, right? So this is what we have studied about heredity and variation. Now, if we want to study this heredity and variation, that branch of biology is called genetics. So genetics is the science of heredity and variation. It was Gregor Johann Mendel who first studied about heredity and variation, and that is why he is known as the father of genetics. He was the first to study the laws of inheritance with the help of his experiments that he performed on garden pea plant, whose scientific name is Pisum sativum. You need to remember the name, and Pisum sativum, since it is a binomial name, that is why you must have gone through the rules of writing these binomial names. We'll be writing Pisum with P capital, Sativum with S small, and when in written, they have to be underlined separately, not fully, separately. When printed, they can be in italics, but if we are writing it by hand, we need to underline them separately. Now, before we studied the Mendel experiment, let us see and revise what are genes. Genes are called the units of inheritance because they are responsible to transfer the characteristics or the traits from parents to their offsprings during the process of reproduction. These genes are located on the chromosomes, which are the thread-like structures present in the nucleus of the cell. And these genes, the chemical composition is that they are made up of DNA, deoxyribonucleic acid. This we already know. Fine. Now these genes are of various types. One are the dominant genes and one are the recessive genes. What is meant by that? The gene which decides the appearance of an organism even in the presence of an alternative gene. They are known as dominant genes. These genes dominate the second type of genes, that is the recessive genes, for the same characteristic on the other chromosome of the pair. Whereas the genes which can decide the appearance only in the presence of another identical gene, not the alternative, other identical gene, these genes are called the recessive genes. Now, for the characteristic to be displayed through recessive genes, identical gene pair is required. A single recessive gene cannot decide the appearance of an organism. Now, when we represent these genes, we represent them alphabetically, and the dominant gene is represented by a capital letter, whereas the corresponding recessive gene is represented by the corresponding small letter. You already know all these things, right? Now, talking about Mendel again, Gregor Johann Mendel, he was the first scientist who made a systematic study of patterns of inheritance. And this pattern of inheritance involved the transfer of characteristics from the parents to the progeny. He did his experiments by using different varieties of pea plants, the garden pea plants, Pisum sativum, which he grew in his garden. And he observed various characters. What were these characters? He studied about the round and wrinkle seeds, the tall and short plants, the white and violet flowers, the green and yellow seeds, the constricted and inflated pod shape, the green or yellow pod color, axial and terminal flower positions. So these were the traits or the characteristics which he studied in garden pea plant. Now, why he chose garden pea plant? There were certain reasons and logics for it. Quite importantly, garden pea plants had a number of clear-cut differences which were easy to tell apart just by looking at them. All these characteristics, they can be just made out just by looking at them. So this was one of the main reasons why he selected garden pea plant, because these garden pea plants, they contained separate distinct features which contrasted with each other. Second, another important reason for Mendel to choose the pea plants was that they were self-pollinating, which means that they are able to produce their next generation of plants easily on their own. There was one more reason why Mendel chose pea plant to study the inheritance. He didn't choose animals including the human beings. Why? Because the reproductive cycle of pea plant is very short, due to which many generations of pea plants can be produced in a comparatively shorter time span, and therefore their study is much more simpler than that of the animals. So these are the three main reasons why Mendel chose pea plants for studying the inheritance. Number one, visible contrasting characteristics. Number two, self-pollinating. Number three, short reproductive cycle. Clear? Now, based on his experiments and his observations, he proposed various laws. The first law was the law of dominance. This law of dominance stated that characters are controlled by pair of factors. These factors are today known as genes, right? When we are talking about a dissimilar pair of factors, then one member of a pair will dominate the other one, which is recessive. And this dominant factor will mask the effect of recessive factor. Furthermore, he gave two more laws of inheritance. First, Mendel's first law of inheritance, which is also called law of segregation. According to this law, the characteristics or the traits of an organism are determined by internal factors which occur in pairs. Only one of a pair of such factors can be present in a single gamete. So indirectly, according to law of segregation, alleles do not show any blending and both the characters are recovered in the F2 generation. We know the F1 generation and the F2 generation. The parents are crossbred and the first generation is called F1, that is the first filial generation. And when the organisms at the first generation are crossed, then we get the second generation, that is the F2 generation, also called the second filial generation. Mendel also gave his second law of inheritance, which is also called law of independent assortment. According to his second law, in the inheritance of more than one pair of traits in a cross, simultaneously the factors responsible for each pair of traits are distributed independently to the gametes. So these are the two laws given by Mendel, law of segregation and law of independent assortment. Based on this, he made the monohybrid and the dihybrid crosses, according to which he studied as to which characteristic was visible in the F1 generation and which one was in the second generation, right? These monohybrid and dihybrid crosses you must have done, you need to practice them, okay? Applying his crosses, we saw how sex is determined in the organisms. There are various species innumerable and they use different strategies in order to determine sex. Some of these are even environmental signals like temperature. Now, in animals like snails, sex is not genetically determined, it is determined by environmental factors. But in human beings, sex is largely genetically determined. In our body, we have got 23 pairs of chromosomes, out of which 22 set of chromosomes or the pairs of chromosomes are called autosomes. And there is one pair of chromosome which is called sex chromosome, which is different in males and females. In females, they have XX combination. This is the pair of chromosome the females have, while the males have XY combination. Males have this XY pair of sex chromosomes. Now, when the cross between these male and female take place, then the child who will inherit X chromosome from her father will be a girl and the one who inherits Y chromosome will be a boy. And since there is an equal possibility of inheriting X or Y, any of the chromosomes, therefore, whenever reproduction takes place, there is a 50% chance of a boy and 50% chance of a girl being born to the parents. Let us see how this cross takes place. This is the XX combination of the female gamete, that is the egg or the ova, whereas this XY combination is there in the male gametes, which are the sperms. Half of them are X and half of them are Y. Now, if the father's gene is X, then in that case, the combination will be XX. Why? Because from mother, it has to be X only, because the mother has only X chromosomes. So if the father's side X chromosome is received, then XX combination will be formed in the zygote, and this will be a female child, a girl will be formed. But in case Y chromosome is inherited from the father, from the mother obviously it will be X only. So now the combination of genes in the zygote will be XY, and now it will be a male child or a boy. So ultimately, we can conclude it by saying that the father is responsible for the sex of the child, not the mother, because the mother has got both chromosomes as X. So it depends on the father. If X chromosome comes from the father, the child born will be a female, and if Y chromosomes come from the father, the child born will be a boy. This is how sex determination in human beings takes place. Clear? Now let us talk about inherited and acquired traits or characteristics. What are these? Let us try to understand them individually. Firstly, talking about the acquired traits. These are the traits or characteristics of an organism which is not inherited from his or her parents, but these are developed in response to environment. These are called acquired traits. Now, these acquired traits cannot be passed on to their future generations. Why? Because in the next generation, only those traits can be transmitted in which changes have occurred in the genes or the DNA which is present in the reproductive cells, which are called gametes. Any kind of change in the non-reproductive body cells of an organism, it cannot be inherited by its offsprings. So acquired traits are not passed on to the next generation. They are acquired by an organism in response to the environment in order to adapt themselves better according to the hostile environment. Now, the second type of traits are inherited traits. These are the traits of an organism which are caused by a change in its genes or the DNA. Such traits are called inherited traits. Now, these traits can be easily passed on to the progeny of the organism. Why? Because these inherited traits have produced changes in the genetic composition, the genes, the DNA of the organism. So we can say that inherited traits actually mean those characteristics, those traits which we receive from our parents. Clear? Now these traits, they lead to evolution. What is organic evolution? It is the branch of science which deals with fossils. This is called paleontology. And the first organisms which first appeared on the earth at about 3.5 billion years ago. Another thing we need to know is that the age of mammals, birds, fishes, insects and angiosperms, it is called Cenozoic era. Few things that you should just keep in mind. This evolution, what exactly is it? It is the sequence of gradual changes which take place in the primitive organisms, and it has taken millions of years. And as a result, new species are produced. Since we are talking about the evolution of the living organisms, Therefore, it is called organic evolution. And it is because of this slow and steady, gradual, constant process of evolution taking place in the organisms since the origin of life that today we have got an enormous variety of plants and animals that exist on the earth at present. Right? Now, there have been various theories given for evolution, start of life, so many things. Let us try to relate a few. Theory of special creation. Now, this theory was given by Father Suarez. According to him, God created life about 4004 BC, and life was created by some supernatural power. This is what Father Suarez thought. Another theory is theory of catastrophism. It says that sudden creation of life was done from inorganic material, and this theory is supported by Cuvier, who is also considered the father of modern paleontology. Now, talking about the origin of life on Earth, very important experiment that was done and which illustrated all was in year 1953 when Stanley and Miller and Harold C. Urey they conducted this experiment by taking four gases. These four gases were thought to exist in the early Earth. Which one were these? Ammonia gas, methane CH4, hydrogen sulfide H2S, and water vapors. No oxygen was taken because in early atmosphere oxygen was just thought that it was not present. Now, Miller and Urey, they maintained these four gases just below 100 degrees Celsius and a spark was passed to these gases. As a result, they obtained four amino acids. Which were one these? Alanine, aspartic acid, glutamic acid, and glycine. So they actually related the origin of Earth from these four gases, and because of the lightning and the spark, these four amino acids were formed, and gradually the process of life formation took place. Right? Now, evolution has taken place, that is quite obvious, but there are certain evidences because of which we can use this word quite obvious. Various biological studies done by so many people, it tells us that since their origin, all the living organisms have been undergoing changes in their organization. They are constantly evolving into new forms. There are a number of common features of various kinds of organisms which actually provide evidences to support this evolution because they can be considered to have evolved from the common ancestor. Now, what are these evidences for evolution? These are the various evidences: homologous organs, analogous organs, and fossils. Let us try to study them individually one by one, talking about the homologous organs first. First of all, what exactly are homologous organs? Those organs which have the same basic body design, same basic structure, but different functions. They are called homologous organs. For example, four limbs of a man, a lizard that is a reptile, a frog that is an amphibian, a bird and a bat that is a mammal, they all seem to be built from the same basic body designs of bones, but all of them are performing different functions. We can see in this figure that in all these, this is the forelimb of humans, this is the forelimb of lizard, forelimb of frog. In all of this, we can see one long bone first, then there is a joint, then we have got two bones in all of these, then again we have got joints, and then we have got small bones in all the organisms. These are homologous organs. Now, how exactly they provide evidence for evolution? The presence of homologous forelimbs in humans or lizard, a frog, bat, bird, all these indicate that all these forelimbs have evolved from a common ancestral animal which had a basic design limb. So indirectly, these homologous organs, they tell us that whether it is a human or a lizard or a frog, a bird or a man, all have evolved from a common ancestor. Our body design is same. That means we had common ancestors, but because of the changing environment, we have used these forelimbs to perform different functions. Frog has used it to jump, and the lizards have to climb the walls, and we humans, we have used it for various purposes, including writing. Frogs cannot write, right? We can, just because we know. So that is why we have adapted ourselves. We have changed these homologous organs to perform various functions. So this is the first evidence in favor of evolution. The second evidence are analogous organs. They are just opposite to homologous organs. What are these? Try to understand. Those organs which have different basic structure. Their basic design is different, but they have similar appearance and perform similar functions. They are called analogous organs. These analogous organs are also known as homoplastic organs. Examples: the wings of an insect and a bird, they have different structures. How? The insects have a fold of membranes as wings, which are associated with a few muscles, whereas a skeletal, flesh, and feathers, they support birds' wings. But both of them are performing the same function, and that is of flying. Now, how exactly these different structured performing same function analogous organs provide evidence for evolution? The presence of these analogous organs, it indicates that even the organisms have organs with different structures, but they can adapt to perform similar functions for their survival under hostile environmental conditions. So even though the body designs are different, even though they are not derived from common ancestors, but still they have evolved. Why? To perform similar functions. Why? To survive, to flourish, and to keep on evolving in the prevailing environment. These are the analogous organs, the wing of insect and wing of bird. Clear? This is the second evidence which goes in favor of the process of evolution. Let us try to understand the third one, fossils. Let us see first of all what fossils are. The remains or the impressions of dead animals or plants that lived in the remote past are known as fossils. They are actually the remains. The normal process is that whenever any plant or any animal dies, then the decomposers act on them, and they will decompose because all the organic compounds, the plants, the animals, they are biodegradable. But sometimes during this process of decomposition, certain environmental factors can cause this process of decomposing. For example, just an animal died in the open. Now the decomposers are doing their work, acting on this dead animal and trying to decompose it. But if at the same time snowfall occurred, now the half decomposed organism will be buried under layers of snow, where now it will be protected from the further action of decomposers, and hence now it is preserved. So these are the remains of the dead and decaying plants and animals, which we term as fossils. Now these fossils provide evidence for evolution. How? While digging up, humans found a fossil bird named as Archaeopteryx. Now it was a very strange type of fossil. Why? Because it had feathered wings, and wings we know are a characteristic of birds. But surprisingly, it had also got teeth and tail just like that of reptiles. Birds do not have teeth, they have beak. So Archaeopteryx actually showed the features of both birds as well as reptiles. Therefore, it was concluded that this Archaeopteryx is a connecting link between the reptiles and birds, which gives the suggestion that the birds have evolved from the reptiles only. Got it? So, this is how fossils provide evidence for evolution. So, these are the three evidences. First is the homologous organs having same body design. Homo means same, same body design, but functions are different. Example, we have seen the forelimbs of humans and animals. Then next one were the analogous organs, which had different body design but performing the same function. For example, the wings of insects, the wings of birds, the wings of butterflies, they are all different body design, but they all are performing the same function of flying. Next are the fossils, the remains of the dead and the decaying plants and animals. And all of these provide evidence for evolution in one way or another. That means evolution has taken place. Right? Now coming to a very important process, that is speciation. First of all, let us know what is a species. A species is a population of organisms consisting of similar individuals which can breed together and produce fertile offspring. They are the species. Now the process by which new species develop from the existing species, that process is called speciation. Now there are various factors which actually led to the formation of these new species. Let us try to understand one by one. First is the geographic isolation. The geographic isolation of a population caused by various types of barriers such as mountain ranges or rivers and sea, that was one of the main factors. How? Because the geographic isolation leads to reproductive isolation, and due to this there is no flow of genes between separated groups of population. That is why speciation could have possibly taken place. The second important factor is genetic drift, which is caused by the drastic changes in the frequencies of particular genes by chance alone. Third factor leading to speciation is the variations which are caused in individuals due to natural selection. Now, it is quite important to understand this point here that geographical isolation is a major factor in the speciation, but only of sexually reproducing animals. Why? Because in sexually reproducing organisms, two parents are involved. So geographic isolation interrupts the flow of genes between their isolated populations through the gametes. But when we are talking about any self-pollinating plant species, then in that case, geographic isolation cannot be a major factor in the process of speciation. of such self-pollinating plant species. Why? Because they do not have to look to other plants for their process of reproduction to be carried out. That is why for self-pollinating plant species, geographic isolation doesn't play much role. It cannot cause speciation. Similarly, when we are talking about asexually reproducing organisms, then also geographic isolation cannot be a major factor in the speciation of any asexually reproducing organism. Reason? Quite simple, because they are reproducing asexually, they do not require any other organism to carry out the process of reproduction. Clear? So it is only for sexually reproducing organisms that the geographical isolation is one of the important key factors leading to the process of speciation. Got it? Next, molecular phylogeny. It's when evolutionary relationships are set up by studying the variation in DNA among the individual humans. Fine? A few terms that we need to relate. First is theory of evolution. The main requirement of this theory is progression and variation, right? And the main and ultimate source of organic variation is known as mutation. When we talk about human evolution, the study of human evolution is also known as anthropology. And if we try to arrange the fossils as per their evolutionary sequence, it will include the following. First of all, Cretaceous, which led to prosimy early arthropods, which led to Dryopithecus. Then it led to Ramapithecus. It led to Australopithecus. Then came Homo erectus. Then the Cro-Magnon, and then the Homo sapiens. Among these, we need to relate a few terms. What are these? Number one, the evolution of man takes place in Pleistocene period. And when we talked about Dryopithecus, these Dryopithecus was the common ancestor of human and apes that lived in arboreal life in Asia as well as in Africa. Talking about Australopithecus. Australopithecus was the first man ape, and the modern day Homo sapiens they appeared or assumed to have appeared after last glacial period, which was about 10,000 years ago. Fine. So these are a few details which we need to relate. This is about human evolution, and this is all about the chapter heredity and evolution. So let us try to brush up what all we have studied in the chapter, coming right in the beginning. First of all, we talked about what characters or traits are. Then we talked about these three terms. One is heredity, one is variation, one is genetics. What is heredity? The transfer or the transmission of traits from the parents to the offspring. That is called heredity. And when we are talking about sexual or asexual both, because DNA copying can't be done exactly 100%, and because in sexual two parents are involved, therefore it is mandatory that the new offspring won't be 100% look alike or similar of the parent. There will be some differences, and those differences we termed as variation. And the branch of biology which deals with the study of heredity as well as variation, that is termed as genetics. Right? Father of genetics, Gregor Johann Mendel. He studied the laws of inheritance, and his experiments were done on garden pea plant. Biological name of garden pea plant, Pisum sativum. We talked about genes, units of inheritance containing DNA located on the chromosomes, thread-like structures in the nucleus of the cell, and these genes are actually the carriers of all the genetic material from one generation to the another. Then we talked about the dominant as well as the recessive genes, how to represent them. Then coming back again to Mendel, these were the 7 contrasting features that were studied by Mendel. It was number 1, the shape of the seed, whether it is round or wrinkled. The height was the characteristic, whether it is a tall or a short plant. The color of the flowers, whether it is white or violet color. The color of the seeds, the green or yellow color seeds were there. Then the pod shape, whether it is constricted or inflated. Pod color, whether it is green or yellow, and the flower position, whether it is axial or terminal. The reason for Mendel choosing the pea plant, quite important, 3 reasons. First reason, clear-cut contrasting characteristics. Second reason, self-pollinating. And finally, short reproductive cycle, enabling him to study many generations in a shorter span of time. Next, we talked about the Mendel's laws. He gave the law of dominance. He gave his first law of inheritance, also called law of segregation. He gave his second law of inheritance, also called law of independent assortment. You need to practice the monohybrid and the dihybrid crosses, right? They're also quite important because based on that you will be asked question. You must know the monohybrid ratio is 3 is to 1 and the dihybrid ratio is 9 is to 3 is to 3 is to 1. Fine. Next, sex determination. In human beings we have got 23 pairs, out of which 22 pairs are the non-sex chromosomes, also called the autosomes, and only one pair is the sex chromosome. In females, it is XX. In males, it is XY. And when the cross between a male and a female take place, it is all dependent on the male as to from male which particular chromosome is coming. Because in the females, we both the chromosomes are X chromosomes. So one that will be coming from mother has to be X chromosome. Now it depends on father. If X chromosome is coming from father, it will be a female child. And if a Y chromosome is coming, it will be a male child. So two things we remembered. Number one, there is a 50-50% chance of the child being a male or female. Second thing, it is the father who determines the sex of a child, not the mother. Father is responsible for the sex of the newborn child. Fine. Then we talked about the acquired and inherited traits. Acquired traits just acquired during the lifetime by an organism in order to adjust itself according to the atmosphere. They are not transferred to the next generation because there is no change whatsoever in the DNA composition or in the genes, right? It is only the non-reproductive cells which are altered. Then are the inherited traits. These are those traits which are inherited from the parents because they are transferred from one generation to the another. Reason, because these traits bring upon a change in the genetic composition. That is why they are transferred to the next generation. Fine. Then we talked about organic evolution and the Cenozoic era. Then we discussed a bit about evolution and the various theories associated with it. Theory of special creation, theory of catastrophism, how life was considered to be originated on Earth, and Miller and Urey experiment. 4 gases you need to remember. One is NH3, that is the ammonia gas. Another is CH4, methane, H2S, hydrogen sulfide, and water vapors. No oxygen was taken, right? When they maintained these four gases below 100 degrees Celsius and a spark was passed by them, they saw that four amino acids were formed. The name you need to remember: alanine, aspartic acid, glutamic acid, and glycine. Quite importantly, we studied about the various evidences for evolution. There were three that we discussed: homologous organs, analogous organs, and fossils. Homo means same, homologous means the organs which have got same body design but different functions. Example you need to relate: forelimb of humans, bats, birds, etc. Analogous organs are totally opposite, having different body design but performing the same function. Examples are wings of a bird and wings of a bat. Fossils are the remains of dead and decaying plants and animals. In this, you need to relate the name and spelling of Archaeopteryx, which actually acted as an evidence because it had wings like birds and it got teeth and tail like the reptiles. So, looking at the fossil of Archaeopteryx, it was believed that the birds have originated or evolved from the reptiles. Got it? So, these are the three very important evidences for evolution. Then again, very important point: speciation. What is a species and what is speciation, and the various factors leading to the formation of new species. Three factors we studied: geographical isolation, genetic drift, and variations. Out of this, we need to understand a bit of geographical isolation in detail, that this is only and only a factor when we are talking about sexually reproducing animals. In case of non-sexual or asexual, geographic isolation doesn't work. And even in the case of sexual, if the plants are self-pollinating, then geographical isolation cannot be a factor for the leading of speciation. Then we discuss about the theory of evolution, which is based on progression and variation. We talked about the human evolution, and we discussed about Dipithecus, and we also talked about Australopithecus. Clear? So this is a quick summary of the whole chapter, and this is about heredity and evolution. What we'll be doing in the next class, you are already aware. Just in order to inform you that since we have completed heredity and evolution, in the next class, obviously we'll be discussing the questions and answers. So needless to say that you need to learn and prepare for this chapter so that you can participate in the tomorrow's class when we'll be taking up the question answer. Got it? So keep working. Till then, take care of yourself. We are ending the chapter here. Today's class, winding it up. In the next class, we'll meet again quite soon in order to discuss the question answers. Fine, guys. So I hope everything is crystal clear. I think you must have understood. There are a few things which require understanding and a few that you need to learn. So please make sure, I've been telling this again and again. So please make sure that you learn, because there is no use otherwise. You are discussing questions in front of such students who have no idea about what you are speaking. Nothing, just only heard and listened and thought that I know. No, this is not the right way of studying. Fine. So make sure that you are prepared. Got it? So we'll meet tomorrow. Till then, stay healthy, stay happy, and take care of yourself, guys.